Hi, and welcome to Realms Unknown special episode. Reveal all, tell all behind the curtain from behind the curtain, but we're behind the curtain and you're also behind the curtain. It's an audio curtain, unless you're watching this on YouTube. My companion on this journey, the Watson to my Sherlock Holmes, the someone else to my someone else, it's
Yeah.
Chris. Welcome.
It's lovely to be here. I have no curtains, neither do I bring lembas to support you on your journey. But we'll do what we can, and I'm looking forward to discussing this. We've got some stuff to say. I feel
Yeah.
it'll be a cathartic experience. Am I looking forward to it? Ask me in half an hour.
I am locked into the most soundproof room in this small chalet in the Swiss Alps next to a rushing river stream in order to prevent my children from hearing me talk, and also so that if I need to, I can leap out the window and be carried away on the rapids. So yeah, if I say anything that's libelous, just say I've been lost to the river.
Alice, why don't you start? So you released a book this year. It was the
I
Bugle's first book, and it's a wonderful piece of work, and it has been discussed on Realms Unknown. Just for those who may only be coming to this episode for what we're about to say, tell everyone the Darcy Lagarde backstory.
All right. I mean, the backstory, the super back in the past backstory.
You can go as far back as you choose.
All right. So when I was 10 years old, I went on a holiday, a summer holiday to the snowy mountains in Australia. Snowy mountains in Australia, you say? What are those? They are mountains that are very occasionally snowy. But they are always mountains, and they're in Australia. And my brother and I went to a chalet there. Is it a chalet if it's not in Switzerland? Perhaps it was just a sparkling hut. But it was full of what I like to call holiday mistress books. You know how you go to B&Bs and they have bookshelves full of crime and adventure and Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code spelled out in copies of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, and the ghost-written memoirs of sports people and the memoirs of sportsperson ghostwriters. My life is Shane Warne's conscience. And also about 8 shelves of Mills and Boon classic romance novels. And my brother and I immediately invented a game, and the game was you had to pull out any romance novel, whatever it was, Greek Billionaire's Secret Baby, that's a real one. Cowboys Christmas Twin Surprise, also a real one. There was one, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a supernatural Christian detective ladies solving crimes and falling in love with mainly policemen, if I recall correctly.
Mm.
And the game was you had to pull out the book, and then to your twin, with a dead straight face, you had to read out the back cover. And I am not exaggerating when I say I laughed so hard I nearly died. There was a lozenge choking incident. It was so funny that when I was looking in the last post, which was a daily satirical news podcast set in an alternate dimension, I was looking for jokes I could come back to for the ad sections, for the recurring jokes. I thought the thing that will keep making me laugh is thinking about those back covers. And I sat down and I started writing this idea that was that about every 4 days in the Last Post universe, a new novel would be out by self-published romance maven and online bestseller Dancy Lagarde. And I said Dancy Lagarde, and I wrote it with too many apostrophes and too many capital letters because I really genuinely thought this has to make me laugh, and no one's ever going to see it written down. I deliberately made it really hard to spell. And, it was just sort of, for me, the question when I was writing it was that it would make me laugh as much as I had when I was 10 years old. So it'd be something like, Violet was a sassy suffragette. She had an anachronistic vocabulary, an elasticated corset, and amnesia. She doesn't need a man, but she can't remember why. And it brought me such joy to do it, and the audience liked it as well. And this, it just sort of became this. I mean, everything's a phenomenon in terms of physics. So I'm going to call it a phenomenon, but I don't want you to think that I'm getting too big for my boots. And I liked the joke, and the audience liked the joke, and I kept getting emails from people about Dancy Lagarde. And then I ran a Dancy Lagarde literary tribute competition where people could send in chapters from these books. And 65 people entered. this ridiculous competition where you had to write fan fiction about books that didn't exist by an author that I had made up on the premise that it was a real author, and they were so funny. I mean, Bugle listeners and Last Post listeners are genuinely talented people, and it entertained me so much. And I was like, oh, maybe I should publish these, but who would buy them? The ones that people had sent in and give everyone a cut of the proceeds. But I'm not good at admin. Why I've never really published a book before is because I'm not good at organizing things. And so, yeah, I just sort of kept the joke running even after the Last Post ended and we were in the gargle. Dancy Lagarde would occasionally appear in the ad sections. And a new novel is out by self-published romance maven and online bestseller Dancy Lagarde, 11th in the Guys from the Skies science fiction romance thriller alien vampire soul bond series. They Came From Above is a groundbreaking space-thumping humpfest set 60 million kilometers from home. Bevlon is a reckless alien navigator from the fascistic warrior vampire planet Glavius 5, on the run from a ruthless galactic government. 50 years ago, he exposed a secret Glabian plot to betray their own galactic troops and has been on the run ever since. He roams the universe, selling his sword and then buying it back again. With money he gets from other jobs and from seducing powerful women for their secrets. When he crash lands on Terra 3, an Earth colony, he meets Max, an innocent farmstress uneducated in the ways of the seductive alien vampire race. Max isn't even sure she believes in sexy alien vampires, but this one has just landed on her porch. He offers to pay for his bed and board with his sword, but she needs a farmhand, and while she might fantasize about this particular farmhand's firm hand, she gets a firm grip on herself and the fact that she's been dreaming all her life about the sexy alien vampire warrior who saved her father from a government plot back in the 4060s. Is Bevlon the man she's been dreaming of? The answer is yes, but find out how, as Bevlon has the answers she craves and he can help her find the lost treasure of her family. Together they enter the seedy world of slave auctions, battle a powerful alien queen whose diseased blood turns humans into cannibals, and discover a passion unlike any other. That's They Came From Above, and available in every good bookshop. And a new novel is out by self-published romance maven and online bestseller Dancy Lagarde. The Lord and His Man is the 43rd in Lagarde's Manly Men and the Men Who Love Them series of historical homoerotic detective romance thrillers with a supernatural twist. Lance is a lord, negotiating the heterosexual pressures of the Regency marriage mart with the help of his plucky valet, Blade, a muscular man of lowly birth and mighty thews, whom Lance impulsively hired when Blade highwaymaned him in the moors one stormy night. As Blade lavishes tender attention on the arrangement of his master's cravat each day, their eyes meet lingeringly, but both are held back by the fear that their love is not reciprocated. Both must constantly adjust uncomfortable erections that each attributes to various buxom women in a comedy of errors and throbbing lust. It's not until Blake's dark past returns to haunt him in the form of the helpful ghost of an ex-highwayman ex-lover while he is helping Lord Lance bathe his creamy pecs in an anachronistic bath scene that Lance realizes he has a chance with the gentle beefcake valet who just fainted onto his erection. And also that Blade has magical powers. But he must solve the crimes of which Blade is accused before his heart's desire is hanged for highwaymanery. And what about Lord Pransling? The sinister dandy who threatens to ruin Lord Lance's reputation unless he promises to spend the night at Pransling Manor, known for its depravities. Lord Lance has no option but to accede to sinister Pransling's outrageous demands and slips out at night to the evil revelry. There, the masked perverts of the Hellfire Club menace Lance's innocence until he is swept up in the tender embrace of a mysterious man whose erection feels oddly familiar. Together, Lance and Blade must unite forces above stairs and below to protect each other, punish Lord Pransling, and expose the Hellfire Club, while also having sex. The Guardian called The Lord and His Man extremely anatomically improbable, particularly in its depiction of full penetration on horseback. Available now in the back of all closets. Whew.
That feels like a higher than usual erection ratio for a dancey piece of work, and that is saying something.
Double the erections, double the fun.
I believe that's the tagline for the movie version.
What happened next, Chris?
The joke kept running and it became super popular. People across the Gargle, the Last Post, the Bugle, all loved it. And I guess doing what I do was I talk to people about business stuff. And in July 2022, we got to the point where we had a conversation with a radical publisher called Unbound, who had done really interesting work. They were a crowdfunding publisher, and it was a really sweet model.
I think crowdfunding publisher makes it sound too Kickstartery because it was such a nice model to like be an antidote to the current corporate bullshit, right? The idea was that you would pre-sell enough to publish the book.
Yeah. And it was like it wasn't just like, and anyone, I guess anyone could turn up with a book, but essentially it became a really attractive proposition for a lot of already really established writers and authors, comedians, people who had an activatable fan base who could come to this project and do something quite new and quite original. And they released a lot of works, fiction and non-fiction, that were really interesting. And it felt a real natural fit. Some of their team listened to the Bugle. So we bounced back and forth about a couple of ideas. And the Bugle over the years, we've had some things. We've had recurring, repeatable things. You've been very good at it. Andy's been very good at it. But the Dancy Lagarde thing seemed a really natural thing to do, given the subject matter. And so about 10, 11 months later, we had a deal in place. And the deal was, it was quite a modest plan at first. It was, we were going to do maybe a 500 or 1,000 book run initially. And in June 2023, we did a pre-sale and we launched it across the Bugle shows and on socials.
Back up slightly. I had lunch with this chap and he was like, "Do you want to write a book?" And I said, "Yes." And I that was like quite exciting. And the premise was that they would pre-sell enough copies to justify printing a
Yes,
run. And so there was no risk. So you would get a better cut off the back end than traditional publishers, which are often hedging risk by offering you a very small percentage of any profit. And sometimes, and I've been offered book deals before, sometimes things like if you don't make back a certain amount of money, then you have to pay
the
back any
advance. Yeah,
advance that they've given you. And like
yeah,
it's a pretty brutal world out there for authors. And I'd always thought it's just not worth the squeeze. And again, I read the contract. It was a good deal, man.
yeah. It was, and it made lots of sense. And the structure as it was that if a book wasn't a profitable book, it would never go into production. So it seemed that, of course, some projects would fall by the wayside, but ultimately, all audiences led the process. Tell us then about. So I haven't got the exact amount of hours, but we are talking. You could measure it. This was a short enough time span that you could measure in hours, not days, that we hit that funding target. And tell us about that experience.
Well, so we put up this idea. They said, "What kind of book would you write?" And I said, I'll write a Dancy Lagarde book, and it'll be telling the story of Dancy Lagarde." And no one will want it, but it's like a silly, fun joke. And I think it funded in 12 hours, and in 4 days, it had like quadrupled the amount of funding that it would need to be made. I remember like the morning after this thing went up, turning to my dad and going, "I think I'm writing a book." And I said, "When should I write the book?" Because I like a deadline. I work well to a deadline. This was in, God, when was it? June 2023, they said?
That's when we did the promotion. Yeah.
Yeah. So we put it out there. It funded outrageously quickly and so much support. And it was so lovely. And it was such a beautiful vote of confidence in me as an idiot. And I was like, "Oh God, I've got Edinburgh. I'm pregnant." At this point, I was at that point like 3 or 4 months pregnant with my son. I had a toddler. Was going in to do a show at Edinburgh called Twist, and basically announced that I was quitting doing gig stand up. Still like doing hour long shows, but never doing another club again. Basically, sort of coming to terms with that. And they said, "Can you finish it by the end of September?" Now, if you know, Edinburgh runs through the whole of August. This was in June. I was like, "All right, I can do it. I love a deadline. Give me a deadline." And I started writing. I wrote it through Edinburgh, pregnant with a toddler. And then I went to Bologna and I just wrote my little heart out and I had it delivered at the end of September. And I was like, "It'll be out by Christmas." I very confidently said that despite knowing through the history of war where they say it'll be over by Christmas has never been true. Um, then Christmas came around and it wasn't out, and I felt weird because people had pre-bought the book, so, like, they'd bought for something that they weren't yet being given. And then in February, I got an email from Unbound saying, "Oh, we've got you a copy editor." And I was like, "What? Why did I rush? I could have spent months and months more writing this book." But okay, yeah, let's go with it. And to be fair, my editor was just delightful to work with. We started working on
She
the
was good. Yep.
art inside the book. I had a big argument with their art department guy who was like, "No, no, no, it needs to look good," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 it needs to be funny."
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up sort of drawing some of the pictures myself because I was like, "You don't understand. It needs to be a pterodactyl with a little baby bow on its head." And the vision in my mind was very clear. Um, and we put it together. We got an artist who we commissioned to do like the Where's Wally pages, where it's a crossover between Where's Wally, the Lost Duke. And it was so much fun putting the book together. I was quite stressed out by the fact that we were not putting it in people's hands yet. And I remember talking to you and being like, "Can we make this happen any quicker?" And we were just told this is how long publishing takes. Normally, people just don't know when a book starts the process of getting published. So that's why you are getting impatient emails once a week from people saying, "Where's my bloody book that I paid for?" And that was the first sort of discomfort that I felt, which is that, like, I'm accountable for this, you know? And yet it's very difficult being accountable for something for which you're not responsible.
And we'll never know the truth behind why the release was delayed, or delayed, or that was as long as it took. Because let's just spoiler alert, some confidence was lost over the year that followed that. We were slated for release in February 25 in the end. With a release in the UK, that is, and there was going to be a US and an Australian release to follow. It hadn't been the smoothest ride, but there were some good people involved, as you say. I think the copy editor was a really good person and had a really lovely brain. And we are the Bugle. And I have to say, we ourselves are not the most organized institution. And so it's hard, I think, to judge somebody else when you yourself, and I put my hands up as a part of this, are not famous for your organizational skills. But we got there. We got to the release point.
Remember when we were flying from Manchester to Ireland and you'd brought your infant daughter's passport?
Yes, yes. For those who don't know, I made it all the way to the gate, which I think was pretty good work from me, before realizing that I had my baby's passport and I got kicked out of the airport. But I will say, and this reflects this project quite well, I still made it to that gig in Dublin that night.
Yes, you went back to London, you swapped the passport.
Yeah.
Your daughter came back from Panama where she'd been disguised as you and and managed to get you back your passport.
Whatever it takes, Alice. And anyway, so then we were really excited about the release. And then there were some rumblings. We got an email on the 16th of January this year from Unbound about a negative article in the bookseller. And I was told that they wanted to give me and you a heads up about a piece that would run in the bookseller. It'd been precipitated by a delay in paying royalties to authors, and they'd spoken to disgruntled authors, etc., etc. Carry on, carry on. And it said, however, you're due a statement for the period up to the 31st of December that we paid on the 30th of April, and the financial controller would prioritize it. They assured us that the project has gone very well and that they would like to discuss doing more projects with us. And just to tell you why they would, our initial funding target had been around £14,000. Months before we went on sale, our pre sales alone, I'm quite happy to share this, had passed £45,000. So no wonder they were saying, we'd love to do more books with you. How did you feel when you started to see those messages about possible delays, about a new CEO, Archana Sharma, coming on board, about, just the general slightly disgruntled run? Were you panic stations? Were you rolling with the punches?
No.
How did you feel?
So I felt First of all, we'd started off with this very modest goal of like 500 copies or 1,000 copies. And then when we did this massive pre funding, they brought us into the office and they were like, everyone around the board table. I was expecting to be treated kind of disdainfully, but everyone was really on board. They're like, we're going to do a 6,000 title run. We think we can tip this over into the mainstream because romantasy is so popular now, and this is very funny and generalizable. And we were going to change the name from the Dancy Lagarde Reader, which is very specific to the niche of the Bugle, and it would have been sold
Mhm.
essentially as merch, to a passion for passion. I brainstormed titles because they wanted to make it mainstream, and they were going to put it in shelve it in literary criticism
Yeah.
next to Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. And they thought, this could potentially go wide. And they were going to back us to the hilt. And we talked about getting PR because if you're going to try and make it in the mainstream, then you've got to talk to the right people. And, I was thinking I am I'm really excited about this. It fits in with my life shift now. I have children. I can't do stand up club gigs anymore. I'm going to pivot to more writing. I'm teaching writing more. This is like really, really wonderful and exciting. And then I saw this email, and I thought, oh, okay, a delay in publication is fine. This is sort of monopoly money to my brain. You see these huge numbers. £45,000 worth of pre-sales is like, okay, that doesn't it doesn't translate to anything in my head, except that at some point I would get paid, and I don't know what the regular payout for books is anyway, and I wasn't
Mhm.
exactly 100% sure on what the breakdown would be, but I was like, "Oh, I'll get some money, and that'll be really nice." And then this delay came in, and I thought, "Okay, that's a delay," but, it's quite clear that the system was that they would hold profits in escrow for the authors. So,
Mm.
funds are probably protected, they just have a liquidity issue, like, I just believed them, I guess, and trusted them. But I was also at this point planning my UK release tour. I was writing the show, which a book launch show. The 4th of February was the release date. My dad was getting married on the 2nd of February, so I was kind of focusing on that. And then his new wife was going to go off to work, and he was going to come and support me on tour. So I had this moment of being like, well, I mean, if I'm not going to get the money to fund the tour out of the book, then I'm investing my own money in this. And that's more risk than I had assumed I was assuming, I guess. That was my reaction to the first email.
It was worry I tell you what I was reassured by though, and that was, as you said, you were doing a live tour. We did a launch party that we put on a nice London venue called, the Bill Murray. That was on the 5th of February, and Andy came along. We had a sold out room full of people. It was absolutely people were crammed in there, including people from the publisher. And that was reassuring to have them there, talking the talk, selling copies of the book, taking pictures for PR, all that kind of stuff. It was like, okay, this is good. This is a really good sign. The book launched. We hadn't had the PR support we expected, but we do have a platform. We were using it the best we possibly can. You were out on tour, and then we received an email on the 13th of March, which was from this lady called Archana, who we'd not heard of before, that announced that Unbound had gone into administration, that a new company was being formed out of it. That would be a publisher and e-commerce platform. It would have a fresh start, merging, taking on board a couple of the other publishers that they either fully owned or co-owned. I'm not entirely sure. Thank you for bearing with us.
We fully intend to honor all of our obligations.
Well, that's it. I sent a message the same day and I got the response. We are on 100% firm ground. New investors are keen to make sure we grow and flourish. And although it's been painful, we have a fantastic team, great books, and a whole heap less debt. Happy to jump on a call for further reassurance. And we got a royalty statement just less than 2 weeks later to that December 24 date that I've mentioned earlier on. And we were told to send an invoice right away for a not insignificant amount of money.
And that was when I thought, "We're not getting paid, actually." When I was on tour, I was like, "Maybe this is all just, I'm just selling books into the hole. Maybe none of these books are gonna come none of the money that I'm making by selling these books is gonna come back to me." And to be fair, I thought, "Well, I could stop selling the book, but I want people to read this book. It's really stupid. It
Yeah.
makes me so happy. And, let's just see how this goes, I guess."
Yeah. Well, we did get paid half of our invoice amount. And we're told on the 30th of May, we would receive the second half. And so don't worry, keep going, sell, sell, sell onwards, and you can continue with your launch in Australia and in the USA.
So that was why I thought there was something sus about that invoice, because they were saying it wasn't the invoice to be paid the amount from the books that we had already pre-sold. That was nowhere to be seen. It was this odd amount of time that they had measured the books that had been sold in that amount of time, and were telling us that with no kind of evidence that that was the amount of books that had been sold in that span of time. And it felt like an odd span of time to be doing a royalty statement for. And I was like, they're tap dancing here.
Yeah. And look, it could be, Alice, that's standard. It could be that there's always a cut-off date, and that's standard practice. But of course, where's the trust gone? We then, on the day we were due to receive the second installment, bear in mind this is largely pre-sale revenue. This is no on-sale revenue. We were told that Boundless Publishing Group is a new company with new investors and new management. We were told that this new company was not on firm footing just yet, and it would no longer make further goodwill payments. And this was the first reference to the work that we had done, the hard work you'd put in, writing this book, touring this book. All of a sudden, that was no longer a royalty. That was described for the first time as a goodwill payment. And with that, John, who had run the company, the person who we dealt with first, just left. And to the best of our knowledge, never has acknowledged any sort of significant failing. A bunch of other people left, didn't acknowledge any significant failing. A handful of the support staff hung on for a brief while, including our editor, who was lovely and great, but even she was on her way out. But then we did finally manage to get through to this Archner character, who seemed cognizant of the fact that we had the book coming out with imminent releases in other dates. And I was quite clear that we couldn't spend any more money promoting without an indication we get paid. And we were told we were heard and to re-invoice, and that we would get paid. So therefore we could then spend money promoting the book internationally.
Well, and also, it was gonna come out in the US. I was planning on doing a bit of a US tour, but of course, I hadn't got any proceeds from the UK tour, and I'd spent my own money on that, and so then it was sort of me feeling out what the options were in terms of going over to the US. They'd said that they'd be able to help sort out a visa so that I could, do shows there to promote the book. That obviously disappeared. Then I checked out the visa stuff on my own accord, and, some of you may know that I made international news, um, because I spoke to a visa lawyer, and she said, "If you've done any jokes about Donald Trump, I don't advise applying for a visa." And that was disappointing, but also, could have been very good PR. I emailed Unbound's PR internal team. I said, "Hey, I'm in the international news. I am the front cover of The Guardian. I am in Breitbart. I am in Irish radio. I'm international news. I'm one of your authors. This feels like a home run to get me on a panel show or a radio show or like this. You could make a lot with that." And I got the email back that she was away. Rena Gill was away for a week on holiday, and I never heard back. I never got any reply to that. And I feel like that's PR you cannot pay for, and it just got flushed down the toilet. And I know that's a sort of a side issue, but it was very annoying, to
It was
get,
extremely annoying.
hundreds of pieces of hate mail and not even be able to use it to sell copies of the book. And even if I had sold copies of the book, I wouldn't have got paid for it. So what's the point?
Well, no. And so a company was appointed as administrator to Unbound. And then Boundless did what was entirely expected, which was they never paid anyone, including people like us who they'd promised to pay, because we were live in the launch process. And we were actually one of the few books that actually could have driven revenue for them as we were in that launch phase. And so they then collapsed as well. That was about 6 weeks ago. And they went into liquidation straight up.
Yeah, which they didn't actually. This is the thing, though. I found that out on the WhatsApp group of
Yes.
disgruntled, unbound writers because we didn't get an email. What we got was a cut
Nothing.
and paste that Archner had sent to the authors in her little stable of a poetry press that she had brought into Unbound, saying, oh, she was so sorry and really, would help them move their books on. They told us. We checked the website, and that's how we
Mm.
found out that they had been completely collapsed and there was going to be no rescue entity. We were never officially told. We had to find out for ourselves and through the news, which is so bad. And there's a lot of stories that are going on in that WhatsApp group. I don't want to talk out of school, but they were lying to people about how many books they'd sold when they'd sold many, 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 many books.
Yeah. Deliberately or gross incompetence, I guess we'll never know which.
To me, that is worse than lying, like stealing somebody's money, is stealing their creative confidence by telling them that they've
Mm.
undersold a book that has not undersold. That is
Yeah.
that's way more immoral to me than the fact that they ran off with the cash and spent it on nonsense.
Yeah. Intellectual negging. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just brutal, a heartbreaking thing to do.
So we got to the position where Alice was at the Edinburgh Fringe doing her show about her book. And because they had gone into liquidation, the warehouse that held the books could not release the books for legal reasons. And so I found some dodgy warehouse website somewhere where some company had got hold of some books that I'm still not totally clear about. And basically, just so Alice could sell books at the show, because ultimately, like you say earlier on, we'd rather having done all the work that people read your work than didn't.
Yeah.
And so managed to send not enough, but some books to Edinburgh for you to be able to sell them to the people who really enjoyed your show. And I was delighted, really delighted, when on the last day of your run, the warehouse decided they now had clearance and offered to send me a few hundred of your books. I was like, "Ah, it's a bit late now." So that opportunity for us to do some really good stuff, selling books daily at the Fringe, had gone, and here we are.
And moreover, we had to scramble to get books because we couldn't get them for the warehouse. We ended up buying them retail from the local bookseller who gave us a steep
Yes,
discount. The book goes for 14.99. They sold them to us for £11, which meant that selling them at the Underbelly venue, my venue that I love working with, and was very happy working with, until I was told that they were taking 20% of the book sales, which which meant, okay, okay, so I'm, making very little per book. Fine, fine, fine. And then there was one day where they forgot to send somebody with the card reader because you had to do it through their card reader.
really.
And I had a line of people wanting to buy books. And I said, look, I guess if some people sort of wandered off. I said, oh, I've got PayPal. If anyone wants to PayPal me the book amount, I will sign and give it to you. And I sold 3 or 4 books that way before the person arrived with the card reader. And then I got a reminder from one of the venue staff to tell them how many books I had moved so that they could take their 20% of that. And somehow for me, £46,000 is monopoly money, but them trying to insist on their right to those like £2 out of the £3 I was getting just filled me with with so much rage. I was like, no, I'm not going to tell you how many books I sold.
There is a separate conversation to be had about live venues across the UK and maybe globally, and the cuts that they take on small businesses attempting to sell merch and the negative impact they have on the movement of that economy. But that's for a different time.
It's for a different time.
We are now in a position where we may get hold of our stock very soon. I am dealing with both administrators from the first process, the liquidators from the second process. We will get hold of some of those books which are currently in warehouses around the world somewhere. We may see a very small percentage of sales that have happened post the first um, administration, but most likely after the second liquidation, but to be determined because we still don't know where all this money is going to at the moment.
I think the thing that is most upsetting to me is that part of the deal we made was with the audience.
Yes. It was the biggest deal.
The deal was you pay money, you pre-buy this book, and you will be getting a copy of the book. And also, you will be making this book possible. And also, you will be supporting me as an artist. And there's something really nice. I do this all the time. I support artists. I buy their work because I want to support them. Even sometimes if I'm not that interested in the work. I got emails from people saying, I've never read a romance novel in my life, but I'm buying it because I like your work and I want you to be successful in what you're doing. And that then as things started to go wrong in Unbound, part of what they were holding over us was, oh, you'll discourage people from buying the book. And we're on, we're in precarious financial
Yeah.
straits. So you got to sell, sell, sell so that we can maybe get ourselves over this hump, which was always apparently a lie. And then also, if you tell people that you've been you're the one they're blamed because you're the face of this failure and they wanted to give you money and they're now being told that their money's gone down a hole. You told them you were a safe pair of hands. You're the bad guy. That was part of what was in the like subliminal messaging of the way that they spoke to us about the way that they were going under that I felt really, really trapped by, you know?
It's certainly left a sour taste. And this is like, as we said right at the start, this has been a brilliant piece of work. Um, Audiences love it. It makes me chuckle away every time that you read something from it. Every time I've read a page of it, I was very privileged when you stuck the book in front of me and I got to read a passage for it at the launch party of the show. And
Can I say my favorite review of it
go
was
on.
just of someone called Jonathan on Blue Sky who said, "On every page there is a line that would be the best line of any other book." And that made me so happy. And then another person said, "Reading your book and seeing your show has made me feel less embarrassed about the silly things that I love."
Yeah, look, that is so. It's just so heartening to hear all that hard work means something to people when you work in this space.
Yeah.
But we're a nuggety organization, the Bugle, you personally, me as well. And, we don't know anyone who's bought copies of this book recently. We don't know if we'll ever see any of the money for this. We really, really don't know if we ever will. But we haven't quite given up just yet.
No, we haven't. First of all, I want to say to anyone who spent money on the book hoping to support me and feels like their money has gone down a black hole, I am so glad you have the book. I'm so glad you bought the book,
Yeah.
even if the money is all going to a series of other creditors and we'll never see a cent of it. It really does make me happy that you bought the book. It was not a mistake to buy the book.
And yeah, I agree with it. I agree with that. But we have, whilst you're in Edinburgh, decided we're gonna do one last really fun thing with this book. And that is, we booked you into a lovely voice studio with some really nice people. And we have now officially, I tell you what, Alice, why don't you announce what we've done?
On the last day of Edinburgh, I went into the audio recording studio and I recorded the audiobook of A Passion for Passion, a thing to which we have all of the rights and we are putting it up. And you can find out in the show notes of this episode or by going to thebuglepodcast.com where you can buy the audiobook and support my work in that way. And I feel like I did a pretty good job. It was a pretty tricky thing. I always said, "Oh, I wasn't sure that I'd do the audiobook because it was originally in an audio medium with the podcast, and how could I replicate the silliness of the original reads of the Dancy Lagarde jokes?" But I think I did a pretty good job, and I hope you will listen.
It's so funny. It's so good. It captures everything about it. I love the idea of you going slightly mad, reading the entire thing aloud again on your own in a little booth. But it doesn't come across like it's genuinely a wonderful piece of work, and it's sort of it's a thing that I would love to urge people to go and consider having a look at, putting it in your ears, and maybe, as Alice says, obviously, look, hey, Bezos will probably take more than Alice or I ever will from this. But it would be lovely if you gave it a try, because it's a wonderful piece of work and deserves as many sets of ears on it as well as eyes. We may still get some of the money. If you want to buy the book, don't, buy the book. Buy the book. If you want the book, buy the book. We may get some pennies from that too somewhere down the line, and I don't want to stop you doing that. But consider the audiobook.
Particularly in Australia, where there is a local publisher who have taken on the task of publishing it in paperback. If you're in Australia, you can buy a paperback copy, and assume that we will be dealt with open and even-handedly there, probably.
With their best intentions, I'm sure. But let's see how, how the UK liquidation system works with regards to that. Alice, well
Yes.
done. I hope you found this a cathartic experience. I mean, I think we've actually kept our rage down quite a lot. I'm very conscious I don't want to get sued. And there are some people who I really want to swear about. And I think we've managed to just about stay the right side of that.
This is what I look like when I'm furious, Chris. Unfortunately, this is true. This is me murderously rageful. But no, I think I feel catharsed, and I am glad that I wrote a book and that it's out in the world. And I hope you, if you get a chance to get a physical copy or an audio copy, take some pleasure from it. If you paid for a copy and are worried that the money won't come to me, send me an email, join up the Patreon, download the audiobook, or listen every week to Realms Unknown or any of the other Bugle stable, and we get supported that way too.
Thanks, Alice. I hope. Thank you, listeners, for listening as well. I hope we haven't. It's a story. It's from a realm that we didn't know, so maybe it fits the bill.
Realms Unknown, Bankruptcy Edition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gulliver was a tall, strong man. He was also wildly in debt.
This has been a Bugle podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Ped Hunter. Your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'll talk to you again next week.
Bye.